This is a series where we talk about what's hot in carbon removal. And for today, that includes what's hot that's moving and also includes what's hot that's like so hot it's starting to break. And what all that means for you, whether you're building a company, whether you're working for a large organization, whether you're trying to get your startup off the ground, maybe you're a student, you're an intern. This is all for you. So welcome. So the big message today, just to frame things up, is that carbon removal isn't on track, and that means we're going to have to try new things to invent this future that we want. So I'm going to get into all what that means, but first I want to go back to the big picture, which is where we always start, right? This slide is why we're here. Every credible pathway that stays below 1.5 degrees or 2 degrees of warming requires carbon removal. So that red line is decarbonization only. The orange line is 2 degrees of warming. The green line is 1.5 degrees of warming. That means that in order to have any of these things work, you have to have carbon removal. It's required, it's not optional, it's necessary. We also talk a lot about this S-curve model from the Rocky Mountain Institute, from RMI. They put this together for the Bezos Earth Fund report that came out last year. And so we're really in that early emergence phase. You can see on the left-hand side of the chart. This is the graph that shows that to be on track for that 10 billion tons of carbon dioxide removal by 2050, that by 2030, we need to be at 285 million tons per year. Now, what matters in this emergence phase isn't, it's not perfection. It's learning curves, it's supply chains, it's actually doing deliveries, right? Like actually removing the carbon. It's making mistakes, it's finding things that work, and then bringing them forward into that next phase, that adoption phase. And this goes back to the tension that's in carbon removal right now. So we're not on track for that 10 billion tons per year by 2050. And you might find this uncomfortable. You might find a bunch of things that I say uncomfortable today, and that's okay. That's what it's here for. That's what AirMiners is here for, is for us to be uncomfortable together as we figure out how the hell do we engineer at the stage, at the scale of an entire planet. So the original theory coming back in 2020-ish was this idea that we'd get big buyers to go first. They would have their peers and they'd influence people. Those people would come in, those big companies would come in. There'd be a lot of volume, and then the prices would fall. And for the most part, that didn't happen. We had some really big buyers come in, but for the most part, other peers didn't bite, right? We had initial launch of some groups and some big purchases, but then didn't see those really grow to be many more companies. And we also didn't see the prices fall meaningfully from that volume. There's also this line that's instead of 2206, that's 2026. Another line that I heard at Carbon Unbound that really resonated was, well, maybe just think about like, our product sucks. If you've got a product and it's not selling, you can blame the customer, right? Like you can be like, all right, it's their fault and those sort of stuff. But look, at the end of the day, we are here to figure out how to reverse climate change, how to get carbon removal to the scale that it needs to be. And look, if saying, it's the customer and the customer needs to change, if that was working, then great, let's do that. But there's another approach, which is to say, look, what can we look at for our product? And in 2026, if you can, like whatever part of your business that you can find that works not primarily because of carbon removal credits, that is like make sure to focus on that. So whether you're running a company or you're participating in a company, you're one of the team, that's the key piece. I think that the bar, we've kind of created these higher and higher bars of accreditation, of registries and these sorts of things. It seems like those bars we've kind of followed the bar as it's gone up. It doesn't seem like the demand is really there, right? We can always make higher and higher quality, higher and higher bars. It doesn't seem like those have really unlocked more demand. So last thing before I get into some of these updates about what's hot in carbon removal, things that are starting to work. If you are running a company today, we're covering a lot in this first 10 minutes. But if you're running a company today, I highly recommend you make a plan for how to hit your key funding milestones with the funding that you have. Get really clear with your team and your investors about what that milestone is. Like, what is the milestone that will result in further funding, whether it's grant funding or investment funding. But for the sake of this plan, assume no grants, assume no bridge rounds or things like that. Figure out what is it actually going to take for you to get to that milestone. It might not be pretty, but it will be a good plan. It doesn't have to be your plan. It's just that you go through this exercise of understanding, kind of being uncomfortable with what that plan might entail. If you have questions about that, happy to discuss, or you can shoot me an email or things like that. So now I want to switch gears to some things that are headed in the right direction. So first off, Germany is headed in the right direction. They approved this 476 million euro budget for carbon removal through 2033. So they've got 156 million euros budgeted in 2026, and 11.5 million euros of that is budgeted for actual purchases. There's also project support, there's administration. And look, I said this is headed in the right direction, and this is important, but this is in the category of like, this is a signal, going in the right direction, but this isn't a lifeline for all carbon removal companies, right? $11 million of purchases, that's going to help out a couple companies, but it's not going to make or break this market. Other update, probably saw this in around the holidays. Carbon removal went to COP for the first time. So we had this first ever historic carbon removal pavilion. It was the first time in 30 years of United Nations meetings that carbon removal was on the ground floor. We were the team hosted events for the whole time of COP. We had people from all different walks of life, different governments, different countries coming to talk about carbon removal. Some of us went to visit the negotiating rooms. And so it's this real institutional recognition at the UN level, at the COP level. The challenge is the institution itself is, I mean, look, the word fossil fuel wasn't in the final agreement for COP. And so carbon removal is now part of that conversation at COP. But, the idea that the global level of politics right now is not coming to save carbon removal. But the direction is good. And so when I think about 2026 and COP31 in Turkey, imagine we can go from a carbon removal pavilion featuring, all things carbon removal in one spot to a carbon removal zone where you've got, look, there's a biochar pavilion, there's a direct air capture pavilion, there's a rock weathering pavilion, and there's a carbon removal pavilion that brings it all together. So that's what I'd love to see for 2026. Here's another signal of things that are going in the right direction. So Japan is really interesting right now. So Japanese corporates, the big signal has been that the Japanese compliance markets are coming sometime in the next couple of years. Now, what that means is Japanese corporates are saying, all right, we want to get ahead of this. And specifically, the way they're getting ahead of it right now is investing in carbon removal companies. So they're not at the stage yet where there are some purchases, but the key signal here is that Japanese corporates are investing in companies to then have those companies grow and then later be able to buy carbon credits from them as part of the compliance market. But the pattern is that Japan's acting like an investor rather than a buyer right now. So if you're fundraising, if you're looking to raise money for your company, maybe it's time to go to Japan. So these are the things that I've seen that are hot right now. And this goes back to why AirMiners exists, right? Reversing climate change is necessary for a thriving human civilization, right? Like in a world where we have a chaotic climate, is a world where human society isn't able to function the same way that we know it, right? This isn't some sort of branding exercise. It's not a nice idea. It really comes down to it's physics, it's the climate, and it's the work of changing those physics and those physical conditions so that we can make have a thriving human civilization. And the measurements aren't looking good. And that is, again, why AirMiners was created. We're a community for people that are reversing climate change. That's if you're an entrepreneur, if you are working for a world government, if you're a policymaker, if you're a student, maybe you're an intern, maybe you're a journalist, maybe you're an educator, maybe you're a philanthropist. All of us are working on this problem in the same direction. And since 2016, since 2017, when we first started talking about carbon removal, creating this community. That's what AirMiners is really for. It's this. It's more important than ever at times like this when look. It's clear there are things that aren't working the way that they need to be working. But what's important about community at a time like this is finding what does work. And maybe you've figured out what's worked. That's awesome. Share what's worked. Help with the pattern recognition. Help with that faster recognition of what's actually working. And if you haven't figured out what's working, then go talk to people that are also trying to figure it out. Because it's that rare signal right now that we need to find and figure out how to scale it. So overall, I mean, this isn't the end. This is the part where we really figure out big things that happen. So with that, I wanted to invite anybody up to share things that you're seeing can be things that are working. It can be something that you're like, this is not working for me. That works too. You can be a CEO, you can be an intern, you can be working for the government. Maybe you want to have a voice modifier or something. Totally fine. You can be looking for a job. My request is that you share specifically. This is something that has worked for you directly or not worked for you directly firsthand. And so with that, I'll take. You can just raise your hand and come up and share. Mike Robinson.
Hey, Tito. Good to see you in
Hey,
Vancouver briefly.
great
And
to see you.
yeah, and thanks for hosting these things. Um, I think, your opening about where we were in 2020 or 21 or even 22, where it's like, okay, we got all these leaders that have shown how to buy it, and now the followers will come along, and then the followers didn't take the bait, I think that's a very apt summary of kind of where we're at. And talking to people who have been trying to sell durable carbon removal all day, every day, what I've heard from multiple of them is that they have great conversations with the sustainability team who says, yeah, we get it. We need to clean up climate pollution and we need to get into buying durable carbon removal. And then they get to finance or procurement. And the question is, wait, you want to spend how many million on what? Why? Do we have to? We don't have to? Well, then let's not. That makes better quarterly earnings. So it really seems like what's not working is that people aren't required to clean up their climate pollution. And I thought at the conference, Julio Friedman shared an analogy that I've heard him use before that Waste Management, the garbage company, is a Fortune 10 company. They're a massive, successful, big operation, and we need several of those cleaning up carbon. But Waste Management didn't get to be a big company because people liked paying to have their trash collected. They got to be a big company because you're not allowed to dump your garbage in the street. You have to pay to have somebody pick it up, or if you want, you can take it to the dump yourself. But you're just not allowed to let it pile up and attract rats and get in everybody else's way. We need to get to that place with carbon. So that's kind of my take in this whole situation is that we don't necessarily need the enforcement mechanisms or the compliance mechanisms to kick in, but we need the writing on the wall so that all companies, all emitters can see this is coming, and we need to learn. We need to get in this market and get off the fence and start making some purchases to support the growth of this industry. Okay, rant off. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike. Yeah, I mean, we can see that signal if you look at Japan, for an example, right? Like compliance market's coming. Okay, great. Like let's start investing today. All right, next up we've got Phil.
Hey Tito, good to see you. So I posted in the chat, and I'm curious if you saw it or if you respond to it. What's the noise at up there at Carbon Unbound about marine carbon dioxide removal, especially the MRV side of it? Is that dead on arrival, or is there anybody making any progress at all on the MRV for the marine CDR sector? I'll let you respond. Thanks.
I didn't see anything, but I wasn't looking for it. Curious if anybody else was at Carbon Unbound that saw anything, or maybe that's working in MCDR that wants to weigh in on the state of MRV. I think that's the answer, Phil. Um, anything you want to expand on that? In sense of you said DOA, is there anything that's been going on in MCDR MRV that you want to talk about?
If you ask me that question, so the ocean is the most difficult place to measure, report, and verify because the water is in motion in every direction, sideways, laterally, and downward and upward. And so the signal is tiny by the time you get a response. There's a long lead time, a delay in the equilibration between the atmosphere and the ocean. So that too is a factor. And I've heard others and well-known people like Greg Rao from Planetary Technology say at the end of the day, you're going to just do modeling of this. You're not going to be able to measure it. And so if you got a model, then you're plus or minus 20%. And which 20% do you want to buy? Or does the customer want to buy? They're going to want to buy the minus 20%. And then you end up negotiating what is that, and your economics fall apart. So MCDR is needed, but not feasible in the economic sense. You can do it physically. The physics are pretty clear cut, whether it's alkalinity or upwelling or electrochemical, whatever. It's the finance and the economics that fall apart. Leave it at that.
Okay. And Phil, if people are watching the video later and they want to reach out to you, what's a good way to get in touch? You're on mute. You're typing in the chat. Great. So we'll include that in the
If it's helpful,
notes.
Phil, I can offer one thing that came up in terms of MRE at Carbon Unbound, and that was seaworthy. Um, I don't know if this was from the stage or just a side conversation, but they have recently published their work that was looking at um, addition of alkalinity through specifically electrochemical. It's not addition of alkalinity; it's removal of acid, right? So, like ebb carbon does. Looking at the impact of that if it was done at every water treatment outfall that falls into the Salish Sea. And through it is modeling, but they were able to model how that water flows and therefore how much carbon uptake would happen. How that more alkaline water or less acidic water would eventually pull more CO2 down. And so there's a paper out about that. One of the things though that's interesting is that if you look at methods that add alkalinity, like enhanced weathering, there's a disconnect over the definition of CDR. So the definition that they were working from is it only counts when a molecule of CO2 comes out of the air and gets sequestered. And folks that are working on things like direct ocean capture and enhanced weathering have the perspective that any atom of carbon that gets durably sequestered from the environment, which includes the atmosphere and the surface water and surface land, that's the definition of CDR, because the problem is we've taken gigatons of CO2 equivalent of fossil carbon from geologic storage and spewed it into the environment, not just the atmosphere. And because the surface and the air are equilibrating constantly, we should treat them as equivalent. It's a lot easier to measure that second thing. It's a lot easier. It's still hard to measure, right? But it's a lot easier to measure the conversion of carbonic acid into bicarbonate than it is to measure actual air-sea gas flux.
All right, thank you, Mike. I also see in the chat, Kareem mentioned that Prono, AirMiners graduate, they just announced an offtake with Frontier. They're doing ocean alkaline enhancement, so you can check out what's going on with that. Next up, we got Pedro.
Hello, how's
Hey,
it going?
Pedro.
I have a quick question in regards to funding events. For instance, I'm going to a happy hour on Thursday, and Spear the Air specializes in CCUS. Now, my question is, how do I maybe navigate the conversation with investors at a happy hour? Especially with right now we have a winery that's interested with Spear the Air's proprietary membrane technology. So we have potentially a pilot uh, lined up for the fall during the fermentation process of the winery, and I'm just curious, any suggestions, recommendations on how to present that to an investor?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, AirMiners is well known for our accelerator program. We've had 227 graduates that raised $250 million for carbon removal. So we've definitely got some tips there. Key thing I would say is learn as much as you can about the person that you're talking to. So if you're meeting with an investor, what's their firm, what's the sweet spot for investment, what are they excited about these days? Um, what are they invested? What have they been investing in the last year? What size checks are they? And that can just help you to focus your time on folks that are a real match. A group that comes in and says like, we love carbon removal. We only write $50 million checks. Probably not a fit for like a first time fundraise. Um, so really, dialing in, asking questions, understanding. I mean, just what are their priorities generally? We always tell teams to get into what are your priorities in the next 6 months is the key question. Not what are your priorities around carbon removal in the next 6 months. Just keep it really, really broad. That way you can know what's important. Then you can position what you're doing relative to that. So that's the approach we always recommend people take.
Thank you.
Yeah, you got it, Pedro. And feel free, you can shoot me an email. You can hop on AirMiners Slack. We've got so many entrepreneurs on Slack and even on this call. So actually, Pedro, if people want to reach out to you, what's a good way to get in touch?
Yeah, I'll put in my email and my number in the chat.
Cool. I love the email and number trend. Calling people is like definitely a 2026 thing. Like I've gotten some weird calls this year, y'all. So Bridget, what's up? Thanks,
Uh,
Pedro. Hey, Bridget.
hey, can you all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, great. Um, so going back to sort of your original question around what are the other options? Something I was thinking about at Carbon Unbound is, are there sort of ancillary revenue sources that don't rely on the sale of carbon credits? So thinking about like somebody referred to it as liability biomass. Like, okay, why aren't we getting insurance companies involved in that? Because it may be cheaper for them to pay for reducing that than fire damage. Is there something about your particular solution that can support scope 3 emissions reductions? Because a lot of companies have commitments to reduce scope 3, but not necessarily carbon removal purchases. So thinking through not just your end goal being selling a bunch of credits, and it could be making your product into credits because that's how you record it and that's how you everybody makes sure the math is right. But it doesn't have to be the end all be all of, we're going to have all these smaller buyers that are going to buy a ton of credits from us. It could be, I'm going to fix this particular problem as part of the market.
Absolutely. I love that. I mean, that goes back to what Pedro was asking about, like this
Yeah.
sense of you can find out what's actually important to somebody. If an insurance company says we're getting killed on there's all this biomass that's burning up. Okay, great. Let's talk about that, right? Let's like how important is that? What are you paying to solve for that? Those sorts of things. That can lead to a conversation where, and for what it's worth, your business can end up solving that problem and like you keep the carbon credits or something, right? It's just you can really if you can hook into something that's a real business need, then it's really it's much more viable. You're back on mute, Bridget.
I think that's good.
Cool.
Yeah,
Awesome. Thanks.
yeah. So awesome.
And one edit on the people sharing their phone numbers. When I said I had weird calls, I've had some really incredible calls this year. I've gotten, I mean, from people in the administration, from entrepreneurs, from people that are doing deals. Like calling people is great. So I highly encourage people to make calls. Howard, what's happening?
Hey, thanks for doing this. I've been observing for a while and calling for the first time, and I help lead a place-based nonprofit working on natural climate solutions, focusing on biochar as really the keystone for the nature-based solutions that are pretty darn good at carbon removal. Although measurement MRV is its own challenge. What I wanted to get your opinion on is whether broadening the value equation to count the co-benefits that go at least with biochar and land-based carbon removal to see whether that could improve the conversation or whether it would just complicate it in a way that's unhelpful. So if you could comment, for example, we're trying to develop eco credits, which is the carbon removal plus the soil vitality, looking at the health of the soil microbiome, looking at the water retention capacity that comes along with biochar and soil carbon. And I'm wondering whether you or any of the participants have experience in having that conversation and creating a carbon removal credit that includes the measurement and the crediting, the validation of those co-benefits.
Yeah, excellent. Happy to answer that. Quick note for the group. It's 9:30, so I want to let anybody that needs to hop. Great seeing you. Happy for follow-up emails and things like that. We'll have this recording up online. I'm going to stay on. I'm flexible for the next 15 minutes or so. So happy to have any other questions. Now, Howard, so your question is, what do you think about expanding from carbon removal as a credit? Can we expand that to include things like soil retention, water retention? I go back to, I mean, what we were talking about with Bridget and Pablo or Pedro, that sense of, I mean, look, if you're a farmer in 2026, are you more interested in talking with somebody that walks up to you about soil retention and water retention or carbon removal credits? I think it is likely that talking about soil retention and water retention is a much more interesting, promising conversation that might even be somebody's priority for the year. Might not. You want to verify that and see what their big challenges are for this year. But I definitely make the case that exploring, hey, we're a water retention company. Also, we do carbon removal. Hey, we're a soil retention company. Also, we do carbon removal. Definitely recommend exploring that. Go have conversations and see what you can find.
Yeah, see, the way we're trying to bundle this under is as a climate resilience credit to have a proactive measures taken today that will make a land appropriate landscape better able to withstand the floods, the fires, the droughts that are on the horizon. So that's how we're trying to bundle carbon removal is with these other measures that will improve climate resilience.
I see. And so your question was, does it make things more complicated to make that part of a credit? My sense is you can go find out. To me, it does sound kind of more like it's carbon rule credits, a more niche of carbon removal credits. So look, if you can find somebody who wants to partner on that or buy it, awesome. And if you have soil retention benefits and water retention benefits, that sounds like something that just might already be interesting for somebody, directly in their business.
Let me just clarify, it's actually soil health and vitality, not soil retention. That's part of it
Okay,
is to
cool,
avoid erosion, but it's really to improve the quality of the soil so its fertility is enhanced.
awesome.
Uh, Just
Thanks for the
just
clarification.
just to kind of jump in. So,
Great. All right, Trevor's up next.
yeah, hi Tito.
Thanks, Howard.
Thanks for setting this up. I was at an event, partly to Howard's point. I was at an event in London organised by Curate and others, and um, and it was called De-risking the dirt, and it was to that point that Howard's just making. It was about much more than that, and I was interested to hear that they were looking beyond just carbon. And so it was interesting to hear everybody that was there, including representatives from Indigo and the rest, all talking about the co-benefits of this in the kind of wider soil health piece. So I think that's interesting. And then there was the commitment from Google, I think, particularly around their water use around data centers. So I think the kind of rounder look at co-benefits beyond carbon and soil health is interesting. And the other thing I'd say is I have a colleague out of Brazil who has a platform called Land Print, which is much more looking at regenerative agriculture. And of course, carbon is part of the assessment for that. But it's really about how you can use these whole set of metrics to drive the business case in the business. And they've looked at, I think they've done work with Cargill, with Natura, and a bunch of other companies across different commodities. So I think it is interesting to see how the business case is made, and I think it speaks to your first point. You know, yeah, there's this market activation going on, but these other companies haven't got on board because the business case or the business imperative isn't strong enough for them. So I think making that business case, you know, however we can, is really imperative.
Absolutely. And again, if it helps to hear it from me, it's okay to go present your company as a soil health company or as a water retention company. Just full stop. The carbon removal stuff, look, AirMiners exists to figure out how we stabilize the climate. Removing carbon is a key piece of that. It doesn't mean it needs to be like the first thing that you say. If we can get there faster by saying you're a wildfire reduction company, then I am for that. Whatever gets us there faster, whatever gets you actually, funded and scaling and figuring out how to remove carbon more and more. So thanks for that, Trevor. I've seen a bunch of stuff in the chat. Not any other hands raised, but if anybody wants to raise their hand, come on up. I'm just going to scan through the chat and see if there's, let's see, any other questions. This was, let's see, that was Trevor's question. Serge, if you want to come and ask your question, you're welcome to. Confidence in, do we feel confident that all efforts are being made to influence compliance markets?
Yeah, I saw some nice responses to that, but I think ultimately what we're all hoping is that someday, somehow, polluters will be required to pay for their pollution. And, I see sort of baby steps in that direction around the world and, some nice progress in certain parts of the world where, it really is happening. And, but I wanted to ask maybe the policymakers on this call whether, not policymakers, but policy influencers on this call, um, whether they believe that all the right steps from our community's point of view are being taken to drive in that direction. And I myself don't know that, but it would be great to hear from others.
If you have anybody else that's following policy, you can hop in, or you can follow up with you afterwards. Serge, it's a good way to get in touch with you.
Yeah, I've posted my LinkedIn, but I can also post an email.
Cool. Let's do that. And you probably read this, but just for everybody else listening, that Mike Robinson, who does a lot of policy work, has followed up. He said there's in the chat. He's not here now, but I'll just read his message. He said there's progress in the EU and UK and Canada in other geographies, and there is progress at the state level in the US. So if in the US, state level can be very impactful, is what he said. All right, folks. Great to be here with you all. Surrounded by a room full of air miners. Everybody's working on figuring out how to make this thing work. This has been our what's hot in carbon removal. Some things are really hot, some things are burning. Um, really, yeah, great to be here with you all, and looking forward to continuing to discover together what are those things that are working right now, and then figuring out how to do them, 1,000 times faster. It goes back to, I think about the origins of AirMiners. When we started our accelerator, we were looking at this AirMiners community that had grown up, and we said, well, what's happening in the community? We found somebody who had met a co-founder through the Slack channel. We met somebody who had gotten a DM from an investor and got $100,000 to start their first company. And we looked at that and we said, that's something that's working. How do we make that 1,000-fold? So that's the type of time it is right now. And then the next phase was then we made 1,000 of those, right? But now we're back into that phase where it's like, what is working? Find that signal. Maybe it's something you're going to see directly. Maybe it's something you're going to find from somebody else who's doing it. For what it's worth, things that work don't always sound like somebody on stage saying this thing worked. Usually, what I've found, especially with people starting companies, is the thing that's actually working, people are kind of embarrassed about. They're kind of like, you're like, how did you get your first sale? This is an example. How did you get your first sale? And the response is, oh, I went on CDR.FYI and I emailed like every single person. And it's not a story of like, I did that. It's like, I kind of did that just to make it work. Those are often where when you hear what's working, those are what those stories sound like. So you don't need to listen to speeches or LinkedIn posts. In fact, if you wait for that, it's probably, it's gonna take much longer for those things to percolate, or is percolate the right word? To make their way out. But yeah, if you can get in conversations and find what's working and just get really tuned into, oh, you did that, and it doesn't sound very glamorous, but it worked. Again, that's what we're here for, is what's actually working. So great to be here with you all. Howard, you said I enjoyed the conversation. Well said. I did too. Great to see you all, and I look forward to seeing you on AirMiners. We have our AirMiners Slack channel. You're welcome to hop on there. If you have questions about which channel, just post in the general channel. That is the best place to just put what you're saying, put what you're discovering, put the question that you're running into. I look forward to seeing you all there.